Welcome back to the MXP San Francisco Modern 20K Headliner. I am Niall Joan Rivers. Joined in the booth with me is Jerry Thompson. We are here for the top 8 of this event. Jerry, I am so excited.
Mill.
Yeah, Mill has been doing incredible. Excited to see Scott play against this Rakdos scam list. I mean, he's put up such an incredible showing so far. His ability to pilot this deck, and we're getting right into it with turn 1. Scott on the play. Otawara as our land drop. Crab immediately. We love these 1-drops, Jerry.
The crab is up there on the scale. It is creeping up the list. I am kind of rooting for Scott, both because he has the most unique deck in the top 8 and has just been absolutely dominating the tournament and has been playing phenomenally as well. It's kind of messed up, I think, to put him against the one Fun Police deck in the top 8 in Rakdos Scam, where I assume this is a pretty bad matchup for him.
Yeah, possibly. Now we are going to see another one of our favorite 1-drops with Ragavan as Christopher's first play. And I gotta say, Jerry, it's hard for me not to root for the guy with the Lorwyn shirt on.
I know. I did notice that. I do think that is cool. Like, where would you even get that?
I don't know, but I hope he tells me.
Like, wearing that shirt is definitely a statement. It's like I've been around for at least 15 years.
Yeah, Lorwyn was my first set, very near and dear to my heart. We are going to see some great cards here milled out of Christopher's deck.
They're all pretty great. They're all pretty scary.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, Scott's hand has a lot of 4-mana cards. Not necessarily where you want to be against Scam.
Yeah. And I think Scott's hand has another land drop, but definitely not 2. And we are fetching in the combat step here, which makes me think we're blocking this Ragavan.
Interesting. I guess if you know you're going to do this into a surveil lane anyway, you could try and get the information before you decide one way or the other. Like maybe it's not very likely that you jump block here, but maybe the top card tells you otherwise.
Yeah. Gonna leave it on top. I'm not gonna block the Ragavan.
Or I guess it is kind of weird because say it is a good card, a card that you want, and you're not very likely to block, then it is kind of awkward because you're effectively just getting rid of your surveil, but you do sort of ensure that your opponent doesn't hit a good thing off of it or a thing that's good for them.
Right.
But how many cards in your mill deck would you be scared of your scam opponent casting against you?
Path, I suppose. Would love that.
I think with Scott's hand, I'd be pretty happy with that. Like, yeah, give me the 4 mana.
We got the treasure now for Christopher. Looks like going to evoke out a Grief.
Scam effect or no, it's not the worst thing in the world because Scott's hand does have a lot of powerful cards. But
I am pitching a Fatal Push. We're looking at 2 Rings of Verdict, a Teferi, and then Arid Mesa for Scott's hand.
I played a decent amount of Scam, and this is generally the hands that you don't like to see is like, oh, all of your cards are kind of busted. You know,
Yeah,
I just want you to have like one or two really good things and a bunch of land.
would love to take it all. Why don't they let Grief take 2 cards at a time?
Because it's already very good. I think would be the reason. And I don't know, a lot of times it does take 2 cards.
That's true.
We saw last round it was taking 3 cards sometimes with Ephemerate, you know?
True, that's true.
So greedy.
Now, it does seem like a big decision for Christopher. Kind of having a hard time seeing what's in his hand. I think he does have one of the Undying effects in there.
Undying Malice, maybe a Bowmaster?
Yeah, I think that's Bowmaster is in the middle. Not sure what the far right card is.
Could be anything. Yeah, I think a lot of Christopher's decision here is going to come down to whether or not he has the Undying effect, and it does look like he does, so that makes it a lot easier, I think, where if you want to get rid of like both copies of the One Ring, you could, for example, but then do you care very much about leaving your opponent with Supreme Verdict when maybe you're all in at that point? Or do you just want to leave your opponent with the redundant One Rings and take out like its very Supreme Verdict?
Right. And Teferi, you know, the only card that Scott can actually play right now. We are going to see the Undying effect on the Grief. It's going to come back. Man, redundancy is such a difficult thing to deal with when you're trying to just Grief scam somebody.
Yeah, all the cards are good.
Gonna leave him with the 2 rings. Take the Teferi verdict.
I think that makes sense. Make it so Scott can't untap Teferi bounce your Grief, and taking one of the One Rings, leaving your opponent with one of them, doesn't make a whole lot of sense either. So I think you have to take the 2 gold cards.
And we are going to see Solitude as the draw for Scott here. Not going to be evocable presently. He's going to play a land, mill, Shieldred, Undying effect, and a land for Christopher.
And another reason to take the colored cards with the Grief too.
Absolutely. I think Christopher was in a position there where virtually any choice he made with that Grief would have been pretty reasonable, pretty defendable.
I think so too. All just depends on what your game plan is.
Absolutely.
But I think it makes it a lot easier to just be like, well, I know my opponent doesn't have to, I don't have to play around like Supreme Verdict at this point, right?
Right, and now we're seeing a Thoughtseize. Solitude, ring.
So in a similar position here, where does it do a whole lot to take a copy of the One Ring when your opponent already has access to one? We've seen plenty of games this weekend come down to whether or not a player is able to find another copy of the One Ring to remove the one that they have that is killing them. So it's not nothing to take it, but given that Christopher only has 1 card left in his hand, kind of incentivized, I think, maybe to take the Solitude and just try to close this game out as quickly as possible.
Yeah, it's an awkward position for Christopher to be in for sure. Is going to take one of the One Rings. I think a totally reasonable choice.
I think so too. I mean, also Scott could just not draw a 4th land or draw a land that ETB's tapped.
Yep, gonna go ahead and swing in with the Grief and the Ragavan. It's like Scott is just going to take that, go down to 11, Ragavan trigger. Gonna hand a Field of Ruin, not gonna be able to play that. Christopher, I think, only has 1 card in hand. I believe it's the Bowmasters that we saw earlier.
In terms of last cards to have in hand, Bowmasters is probably what you would want here.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be nice once Scott has to start digging with the ring.
And it just adds more pressure, and we'll maybe be able to get that crab out of the way at some point too, and disincentivize Scott from activating the ring too much.
Yeah. Fable, Shieldred, land, milled off of this crab trigger here. And Scott is going to get a Surveil. Looks like he left it on top. It is a land. He's going to be able to get the ring. Gonna mill another 6 cards. It's going to be Grief, Thoughtseize, Swamp. Here we go again.
Doesn't seem like much what this crab is doing, but you see Christopher's graveyard getting bigger and bigger. Like, it is adding up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like this from Christopher, playing the Bowmasters in response to the One Ring. Could be kind of tempting to wait for your opponent to maybe try and activate the ring main phase or something. But this just gets it in play, and if your opponent were to just pass the turn, then at least you'd still amass a slightly larger orc.
Yeah, and Christopher with quite the board. Scott with Solitude, Solitude.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's not nothing for sure.
Yeah, definitely did want to draw a white card off that ring. Probably have to point that Solitude at the Grief, and then there's 5 damage coming in. Still has the Hedron Crab to potentially block. Never mind.
Yep. Crab is going to get Fatal pushed. And we're just going to pass as Scott has ring protection. No reason to attack. Looks like land is the draw, so these Solitudes can just be hard cast.
So now Scott's in a spot where he has the One Ring, but Christopher has the Bowmasters in play still. And doesn't necessarily want to activate that, and might be just in a position where you wait for combat, play out the Solitude, see how all of that shakes out, and then whether or not you want to activate the ring on end step.
Yeah. Definitely has choices here.
I think Christopher is slightly ahead, but Scott certainly has the more powerful stuff going on. And I would not be surprised if he was able to get out of this.
Yeah, Christopher definitely is ahead, but I think less ahead than it might appear if you were to just look at the board.
Yeah, assuming Christopher doesn't have anything to remove the Solitude in combat, Scott could even just target the Bowmasters with the Solitude, just sort of ignore the Grief, maybe trade the Solitude with the Ragavan, get a little bit of life buffer there, and then you get to freely start activating the One Ring. And if you wanted to do that in combat still, you could even potentially find another white card, pitch the other Solitude, get rid of the Grief, and then you're at a pretty sizable life total.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is a very, very pivotal turn here for Christopher. So close to getting Scott out here, but also knows about at least one Solitude. Knows that Scott has the mana for it.
It is the danger of leaving that card around with the other Thoughtseize, whereas if you left your opponent with a second One Ring, you'd just kind of be in the same spot, except your opponent would not have the Solitude.
Attacks with Grief and Orc Army only.
Doesn't want to attack with the Bowmasters and just get that blocked by the Solitude. That makes sense. Kind of surprised to not see the Ragavan get in combat, I suppose.
Yeah, a little surprising. A little surprising indeed. Alright, looks like Solitude coming in is going to exile the Grief. And is going to block the Orc army. It's gonna bring Scott back up to 10. And then a Blood Moon from
Dang.
Christopher. Scott's gonna draw a couple cards and take some damage from the Bowmasters.
I was wondering what Christopher could have there as a sort of follow-up, and Blood Moon seems among one of the stronger cards he could have.
Yeah, that is quite the follow-up.
Scott does have a basic plains and is only playing a 2-color deck, but is doing some kind of fancy stuff with his mana base. So that plains is the only basic he has access to.
Right, so Solitude not going to be able to be hard cast anytime soon. Looks like a Spell Pierce in hand, or sorry, it might be a different art.
I think it's a Rune Crab.
I think you might be right. But either way, not going to get cast. Has 4 mountains and a plains. It's going to Prismatic, ending the Bowmasters. This is good. Let Scott use his ring safely. Try and dig for a way out of this.
Still nothing that's really castable because only has 3 non-basics left, only non-basics in hand, so you have access to 4 red mana but can't do anything with it. Did draw a white card to go with the Solitude, so is not going to die this turn. Still needs a lot of help.
Yeah, definitely needs help. Christopher gonna attack in. Solitude's gonna get evoked. We're gonna see it exile the Ragavan.
Has to pitch the Path to Exile.
Yeah, that is brutal.
The only card he had that was castable on the next turn.
Scott's gonna go down to 1 at the start of his turn.
Not 0. That's all that matters for right now. And then the One Ring probably has to serve up another copy of the One Ring.
Yep. Scott goes to 1 off the ring trigger. Activates One Ring. Gonna draw 4 cards. Does find another One Ring immediately. Followed by 2 lands and a crab. This does buy him another turn.
Buys him a turn, but he's still at 1 life. Can't even activate the ring to draw a card until his next main phase.
Yeah.
It's not ideal, but he's not dead yet.
Yeah. Plays One Ring, gets protection. And Scott just gonna pass it back. Or sorry, Chris gonna pass it back. Scott going to draw with the One Ring. I think it's a Preordain, which he cannot cast.
Yeah, not castable.
And he's just going to scoop to Christopher. That is going to be game 1. Going to Christopher. Beating our top seed on Azorius Mill.
Incredibly close game. That Blood Moon, potentially the nail in the coffin there, I think.
Yeah, that was an extremely tight game. Blood Moon absolutely backbreaking for Scott there.
Oh, 1 copy in Christopher's main deck.
Ooh, the fun of one of. But we're going to be going into a game 2, Jerry. And Scott will be on the play once more.
Looks like a little more diverse hand this time, wider range of casting costs, so maybe not stuck with all 4 drops this time, but there's also mulliganing, I guess. Perhaps did not have the lands to cast those spells.
Yeah, perhaps not.
And
Also, looking... Oh wait, no, you're right. Oh man, it really is just a 1 blood moon.
yeah.
We see a K command, 2 Shieldreds.
Fatal Push and I think 3 lands, so not a very aggressive hand, but definitely pretty powerful. Polygon's command, kind of a free roll when your opponent's milling you already. You'll get to maybe kill a crab and then also rebuy something. Pretty decent there. I don't know if Shieldred is powerful enough in the matchup where you just like keep your hand based on the strength of that card. Obviously, it is very good against the One Ring, but you're also playing against an opponent who has a bunch of Solitudes, Path to Exile, Supreme Verdicts. Like, how good is that card exactly?
Yeah, hard to keep a Shieldred on board against Scott, for sure. And looks like we are resolving some mulligans here. Preordain, Path, One Ring.
Ready? Yes.
A few lands.
2 Hollow Fountains and a fetch land. Gotta imagine that Scott is at least a little concerned about the Blood Moon after last game.
Yeah, definitely should be.
There's only 1 more copy in Christopher's sideboard, so maybe it's not a thing you need to be too concerned about, but certainly
Yeah,
don't
one more
want
copy.
to be giving your opponent any free wins.
There is a Magus of the Moon. But that's certainly a little easier to deal with for Scott.
Quite a bit.
Is gonna go ahead and fetch out the Surveil land, get a Surveil trigger.
I think I would be tempted to get a basic Plains. I don't know.
Yeah, that's scary for sure. Maybe hoping the ring can get you there. Looks like having a bit of a think on the Surveil trigger. Makes sense. This is high stakes. They're in top 8. It has been a long path to get here. And Scott going to bin, looks like a fetch land. Draw a Field of Ruin. Gonna cast Preordain. We're gonna see Solitude Island.
It could be kind of tempting to keep that 4th land because you have the One Ring, but you could also reasonably expect your opponent to have a Thoughtseize or a Grief by the time you're ready to deploy that anyway. Plus, you had Preordained, so I feel like probably going to find land 4 at some point. So I like binning the fetch land off the Surveil.
Yep, and we are just going to play Hallowed Fountain, shocking it in, passing over to Christopher.
Just leaving up for Path to Exile, so scared of a potential Ragavan dash, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Looking over the sideboards a little bit, Scott's kind of weird choices we talked about yesterday, like 4 copies of Rest in Peace, stuff like that, served him very, very well.
Yeah.
But in terms of having things for this matchup, there's not a lot there, actually. Like, there's Leyline of Sanctity if you want it to stop all the discard effects, and a 4th copy of Supreme Verdict, maybe, but I think that's about it. So he mostly has to beat Christopher with his main deck, I think.
Yeah, definitely does not have the tools in the board that he did against stuff like the Breach list that we saw him play, where games 2 and 3 he was really able to transform the deck and totally flip the script in terms of who had the advantage. But Scott, also an extremely strong player. Would not be surprised if we are able to see him pull through this. It is going to be a Dothy for Christopher on turn 2 here. Scott does have the option path if he wants.
I think you're going to have to path that thing at some point. But yeah, you can. This is not as threatening as a Ragavan Dash. You could potentially take a couple hits from it and just not accelerate your opponent quite yet. I think that's reasonable.
Mm-hmm. So we are going to see... So we might be seeing the crab come down this turn. Scott thinking a good deal about it.
You can potentially activate the Field of Ruin this turn and get at least one basic out of there for fear of future Blood Moon, or you could just simply play the crab, play the tapped Hollowed Fountain, leave path open. You have the One Ring ready to go next turn.
Yeah,
Decent amount of options.
I imagine Scott feels a lot safer knowing he has the One Ring. And even if he does get Blood Mooned, he still has that play. He knows he can still evoke creatures. But definitely, you know, Blood Moon's still very effective.
Yeah, it's tough. He only has 4 basics, 2 islands and 2 plains, so you can only juggle 1 rings to keep yourself alive for long enough. Eventually, you are going to have to find some of those basic lands and start being able to cast your spells, assuming that Christopher does have a Blood Moon.
And it looks like we are going to see a Grief evoked. Not sure what Christopher is pitching quite yet. It's like pitching a Shieldred. And Grief Trigger is on the stack.
Yeah, this is tough. You don't know if your opponent has the actual scam effect, but either way, I think you have to path to exile the Dothy to ensure that your opponent does not steal your copy of the One Ring.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely can't let the Grief resolve with Dothy on board, especially when your hand is as full of as much powerful cards as Scott's is.
This was kind of what I was expecting, though. And Christopher just waiting until the turn before Scott is able to deploy one of his powerful 4-mana cards. Fires off the discard spell then to get maximum information. And Scott was kind of banking on this copy of the One Ring. I was not that sure that it was going to survive, though.
Yeah, and we got Solitude, Field of Ruin, One Ring as Christopher's options for what is going to get discarded here.
I don't know if it's going to be 1 or 2 cards, but either way, I think that One Ring is going away.
Yeah, I think so too. Yep, we're going for the One Ring first. It looks like it's just going to be the One Ring.
Christopher still has a copy of Shieldred left over, also has the Kolagon's command from his opening hand. This is only his turn 3, so can't like deploy Shieldred or anything quite yet.
I'm just going to push the crab and pass it over to Scott, who's going to draw another Field of Ruin. This is good, you know, he can start to build up his basics. As a Blood Moon last turn would have been pretty devastating.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, before the Path to Exile, it would have been kind of devastating for Christopher, too, because it would have left him with all mountains.
Yeah, true.
Now, 2 swamps on the battlefield. I think Christopher is pretty happy to deploy a Blood Moon if at any point he draws one.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to see a Grief hard cast. Gonna take the Solitude, the only choice, leaving Scott with just the Field of Ruin in hand. Gonna draw another land. And the Field of Ruin down one of the lands, get a Plains.
So now one of each basic, and if you do get to untap again, at least Scott has the Arid Mesa.
Mm-hmm.
So that would let him get the second basic planes in play and be able to cast things like Supreme Verdict, even through a Blood Moon. So that's good. But now you're facing down this Grief. Scott doesn't quite know about Christopher's follow-ups in hand, but potentially a Shielder coming down this turn.
Yeah. Although looks like just the 2 basic swamps for
One is in the
Christopher?
graveyard. One got milled by the crab.
Yeah, and it looks like we're gonna get Ragavan back with the K command. Gonna have Scott discard that Arid Mesa. And there's one ring off the top.
Not a bad draw.
Not a bad draw.
Get this turn of protection. I feel like you might as well just draw the card now.
Yeah, before you risk something like a Bowmasters. Gonna go ahead and draw the card. It's gonna be a Preordain, which you can cast.
I was thinking if you get a land drop, you could make it, which would be kind of nice. But yeah, hitting a Preordain, also pretty good.
Yeah, it looks like we saw the ley line there, which it looks like he did bring in from the sideboard. I think put both cards on bottom, ended up drawing a Solitude.
Game shifted kind of quickly. Was looking pretty good for Christopher after that turn 3 Grief taking out his opponent's 1 ring, but top deck 1 ring.
Pithing Needle named 1 ring.
Maybe back in the other direction now.
Ragavan played straight up, no reason to dash it. Scott's under protection of the ring, another 1 ring.
Well, that'll allow him to get the ring off the battlefield at some point. That is slowly killing him, but
Yep.
no need to do that right now.
Going to combat, attacking with everything. Solitude comes in. It's gonna exile the Ragavan, wants to make sure Christopher's not able to make any treasures. Keep him on 3 mana as long as possible.
That's interesting because there's not a lot in Christopher's deck that would allow him to kill the Solitude in combat and prevent Scott from trading with the Ragavan if he wanted to. So he could potentially Solitude the Grief and then just block, but maybe wanting to keep the Solitude around as an attacker and just get the lifelink buffer from it.
Sure, and that was a Angrath's Rampage played by Christopher there. force Scott to sacrifice a creature.
Protection here.
And we're going to see a One Ring. I think that might have been a verdict that he drew.
Yeah. I like this from Scott. At 9 life, facing down a grief, but still not wanting to fire off that Supreme Verdict, knowing that at the very least you should be able to get a 2-for-1 out of it. And Scott doesn't have a lot of resources right now, doesn't have a lot going on. It might be worth it to wait, but maybe punished here.
Yeah, punished pretty heavily. Can't even dig with the ring. Still under the effects of Pithing Needle. And because we lost that Arid Mesa earlier to the K command, never got to fetch that second Plains.
Yep. So Blood Moon looking pretty good for Christopher. Still has access to 2 swamps, and Scott stuck with only 1 of each basic.
So right now, Prismatic Ending, pretty decent draw. Plains, pretty decent draw.
It's a very Time Raveler would it would help a little bit with the Pithing Needle, or you could even bounce your 1 ring to get another turn of protection.
Plains, no longer a relevant draw. And Plains was the draw. Oh, brutal. That is going to be a scoop from Scott. Christopher Smith winning the match, beating our top seed in the top 8. Blood Moon got there twice.
Wee woo, fun police. Put your Hedron crabs away.
Oh. All right, well, that was our first match of top 8. Congratulations to Christopher there. We are ready for our backup match of top 8. So, Jerry, if you're ready, let's hop into that.
I'm ready. I'm sad.
Right, we're going to get to that in just a second here. But, I mean, so far, I am excited to see where this top 8 ends up. I mean, I know we've got a lot of different decks here. I don't know if there was a single duplicate archetype among the top 8 when we were looking at the list earlier.
Mill Scam, Teamer Breach. I want to ban players who mislabel their decks. Espergorios, Bant Hammer, the mono black no coffers deck, Amulet, Yogg.
Yeah, I mean, really just like a lot of variety. And I mean, congratulations to Scott as well, getting it to top seed of the top 8. I mean, he played so good all weekend, really piloted his deck expertly. That is a tough matchup. Let's take a look at the bracket real quick, Jerry, and see how things are looking. So here's the top 8. And I think we're actually going to be going into game 3 here of Yawgmoth versus Breach. But here are the standings for the other matches. It's like we've got no coffers going forward, Rakdos, Scam, and Gorios beating out Titan. So here we are, Jennifer Wing versus Dan on Timur Breach. Not sure who's on the play here, but looks like players resolving mulligans. Looks like Jennifer's on the play.
I played a decent amount of Breach, but it was around the time when Yawgmoth was like 3% of the metagame or something. I never really got to play this matchup all that much. So I'm kind of curious to see how this plays out. I would imagine that Yogg is at least a little bit of a favorite, but I can see it going either way.
Yeah, it definitely seems like something where, Yogg has some main deck tools for you and definitely has some sideboard tools for you. But, I would say it is probably going to be a tight match. But for Dan here, we are seeing a Preordain as he looks through. top couple cards, looks at his hand.
The problem, especially with these breach decks that don't have the actual I win combo, is in a lot of cases you're either trying to get in some early damage with DRC and Ragavan and finish the game off with stuff like Lightning Bolt, but Yogg is pretty good at stopping those things just with Young Wolf and Endurance and whatnot.
Yeah, and it
So
looks like for Jennifer here, we're seeing a bunch of lands. I think that's a couple Pick Your Poisons and
Yeah.
a Grist, and not sure what the last card is. Might be a Yogg. I think it is a Yogg.
Looks like a Yogg to me. Yeah, Jennifer even has the Pick Your Poisons to take care of the Ledger Shredders or Delirious Dragon's Rage Channeler too. So very much just looking to buy time, knowing that her deck is probably going to be able to assemble either an infinite combo or just like a massive board presence and overwhelm
Yep.
each deck.
And she is going to fetch out a Surveil land. And Jennifer, our second seed of the top 8. Of course, we covered one of her matches yesterday. She played this deck extremely well. Very excited to see how this third match goes. I think that was a Bowmasters on top of the deck there. She's going to leave it and draw it. I think it's pretty decent as well. And she's just going to pass, not wanting to play Grist into Dan's open mana.
Yeah, notably, Dan doesn't have a whole lot to actually interact with the Grist, like on the stack. The only permission is 3 copies of Spell Pierce. Does have some Stern Scoldings in the sideboard, but could pretty easily take it down with like an Unholy Heat or something. So I get trying to wait and maybe just treat the Grist like another sort of removal spell.
We're going to see DRC. We're going to see second DRC. And then Bobble on the stack.
The first one resolves, bins a DRC, still 1 card away from Delirium.
Yep, and Bowmaster is going to take care of one of these.
Love this play from Jennifer. Also, like, could have just jumped the gun and immediately used the Bowmaster, but she got to see at least 1 card from Dan before even making the decision, so. Very small amount of equity, but still just very tight play.
Yeah, very tight play, and, you know, small equity, still equity.
Exactly.
And taking every percentage point is certainly how you find yourself in the second seed of the top 8 of a tournament of this size. So we're going to get another Surveil land out. Taking a look at the top here.
I wonder if Dan is going to let this resolve and then use the Bobble, because if he waits and uses it on Jennifer's turn, Bowmaster gets an extra trigger in.
Yeah, and we're going to see Boseiju as land for turn, and Yawgmoth being cast by Jennifer. Seems to be resolving.
I don't think... Yeah, Dan doesn't have any subtleties or anything like that. You see the... albeit like very shiny, but like that's a Gigantha companion, you know, so...
Yeah.
Tells you at least a little bit about his deck.
I think that is a dress down in his hand. I saw flipping through very quickly. I'm gonna see a lightning bolt onto Yawgmoth.
Hmm.
Triggers DRC.
On top.
Looks like he's leaving it on top.
Bolt this or go. Leave on top.
And then second bolt onto Yawgmoth.
Definitely not the ideal way to take care of that guy, but you do what you got to do.
Yep. He was important to take care of.
I'm gonna sack this army targeting your
Dan's hand kind of awkward. So pick your poison, which he cannot cast currently. No green source.
Yeah.
Dress down, which usually goes alongside something else. Like if you want to then lightning bolt a young wolf or something. So not
Yeah.
great on its own. And then an underworld breach, which also you kind of need additional mana for. So kind of in an awkward spot here.
Yeah, no, Jennifer sacked the Orc army to put a -1/-1 on the DRC. Dan cracking the bauble in response does get us to Delirium, but it is a slightly smaller DRC thanks to that -1/-1 counter.
Yeah, now if Jennifer is able to find an endurance or something to take out Dan's graveyard, DRC is just going to die immediately.
Hmm. Or, you know, something like that Soul Cauldron in hand.
Oh,
Looks like Jennifer is marking the DRC for appointed damage off of Bowmasters. And draws another Bowmasters.
how do you want to kill the DRC? Because now you have so many options.
You have many ways. Alright, here comes Grist. See an uptick. Hit Grist, hit Young Wolf. It's gonna make an insect token. We're gonna follow that up with a Soul Cauldron. Get Yawgmoth in the pot. Put a counter on the Bowmasters. Now she has two different creatures that have Yawgmoth text. And having
Fun.
that 1 damage marked on DRC is going to be quite relevant.
use the bowmasters to sack this insect targeting your DRC.
13.
We're going to get rid of the DRC, draw a card, lose a life.
Wasn't that
See a
enough to
Chord of Calling in her hand there.
I'd be going from 15 to 14.
I'd be going from 17 to 15 on the attack for 2.
So Jennifer up to 5 mana, commanding board position. Dan's still stuck on 2, with also just not even a ton of resources.
Yeah, I mean,
And I think Jennifer just doing a great job of trying to not die, and then hoping that the powerful mid-range stuff just carries her.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, she clearly knows this deck very well. It is not an easy deck to pilot. The skill ceiling on it extremely high, but she's definitely being rewarded for the level of mastery she has over it.
Absolutely. I mean, we talked about how Scott kind of crushed the tournament. He went 11-1-1 in the Swiss, but Jennifer went 10-1-2. That's roughly the same thing. You know, they both only had 1 loss.
Yeah, absolutely. Extremely, extremely skilled play from both players. Two Pick Your Poisons Chord. Not sure what the 4th card was.
Honestly, I think Jennifer could maybe get mind twisted at this point and still be a favorite to win, but we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Agatha's Soul Cauldron does so much work for the Yawgmoth deck.
Dan did find a fetch land that did unlock green mana. So now he could cast Pick Your Poison this turn to get rid of the Soul Cauldron, but still an uphill battle.
Going to Pick Your Poison on Jennifer, make her sacrifice an artifact. That's going to get rid of the Soul Cauldron. These creatures are no longer little Yawgmoths. Oh, right, that's another Bowmaster, as we saw that earlier. Gonna uptake Grist, hit Grist one time. Nope, it's gonna be a Wall of Roots. Gonna get an insect.
Not when we're in the booth. Apparently that kept happening for Tannen and Andrew, but not us.
It should be me. I would freak out, Jerry. I love when Grist hits Grist. All right, I mean, Jennifer with the Court of Calling. As much mana as she could ever reasonably want.
Yeah, it has enough to Court for Yawgmoth, still have 2 open to pay for Spell Pierce if Dan left those in. After it does not get Spell Pierce, she could then cast a follow up Bowmasters. If Dan does something weird, like maybe plays an Underworld Breach that does look threatening, still has the ability to get Endurance too.
And it looks like we are doing the Cord on Dan's upkeep. Which I really like this if he wants to force it. Gonna have to basically spend his turn to do so. And she still has the mana to play that other Bowmasters. But it is going to resolve. This is going to be a Cord for 4. Yawgmoth hitting the board.
For the 3rd or 4th time, depending on how you want to count this Soul Cauldron stuff.
I want to count it as the 3rd time.
Okay. How many does it take? Yeah, I feel like the Soul Cauldron gave Jennifer more than enough value, where this just seems extraneous. Yeah.
Well, that's what Yogg is good at. Doing the most. All right, we're going to see Dan fetch out a mountain here.
Looking at that graveyard a little bit, maybe seeing how good of an Underworld Breach turn we can have, but I don't think it's going to be a great one.
Yeah. All right, Breach has resolved. Jennifer's taking a look at the yard as well. She can plan how she is going to engage with this.
There are a lot of cards in the graveyard, and could do a lot of Mishra's Baubles, but Jennifer has some Bowmasters, and there's this Yawgmoth that you kind of want to kill, but you don't have a clean way to do it because the only thing you have access to is Lightning Bolt. So this is almost certainly Dan's strongest play. I'm just not sure what he's going to be able to accomplish with this. If it's going to be enough.
Right, and you know, getting this DRC online, you know, Jennifer does have options to get it off the battlefield. Slow things down a little.
Yeah, and it's all on board too.
Yep.
3 things that could very easily get sacrificed, but I think Dan's plan might be DRC, try and keep this thing at a 3/3, play some Mishra's Baubles and draw some cards, but also make sure to try and bolt the Orcish Bowmaster. But that's not knowing that Jennifer has the backup Bowmaster too. So even if all the stuff that Dan wants to do plays out the way he wants it to, I think it's still going to end kind of poorly.
Yep. We are going to crack the bauble. Take a look at the top of Jennifer's deck. And looks like we're going to be casting bauble again. Which going to
take him off Delirium.
Briefly take him off Delirium. Jennifer can't really kill it. I mean, when she does, Dan's just gonna be forced to just let it die.
No, the bauble's on the stack still.
Oh, the bauble's on the stock. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Jennifer had about 4 different ways to kill uh, DRC there. We are still going to get the Surveil trigger. I think Dan would put just about anything in the yard at this point.
I think so too.
I'll exile these 3.
Got a lightning bolt onto the Bowmasters.
Second, no target.
Yeah.
Back the Yogg, draw a card. Sure, why not?
I'll bobble you.
And this is going to be another bobble. Of course, we know Jennifer has backup Bowmasters. Very strong right now.
Like, yep,
And
that's good
Dan
enough.
is going to scoop. Yep. Congratulations to Jennifer once again putting on display her expertise with the Yogg deck.
Yeah,
Really tight technical play.
incredibly well played by her. And I mean, I think Dan also played well, just had some mana issues. Possibly had to mulligan that game or something. Like, just didn't have a whole lot of resources.
Yeah, it's not have a whole lot of resources. Definitely played well with what he had access to. Let's take another look at the bracket real quick, Jerry. See how things are standing.
So far, I think the 2 coolest decks have been eliminated.
No, that's not true. We just saw Yawgmoth go forward.
Oh, my mistake.
Yep. Which
2 of the
in
3 coolest decks have been eliminated.
There we go. In the semis, we are going to have Rakdos Scam versus Mono Black No Coffers. And then we're also going to be having Yawgmoth versus Gorios.
Well,
Now,
I think I know who you're rooting for.
oh, absolutely, you know who I'm rooting for. And I think that's who we're actually going to be watching first. The Yawgmoth deck, once again with Jennifer, up against Gorios. After just a quick break here, just a couple minutes, we'll be right back with the semis. I can't wait to see how this plays out, Jerry.